What are some of the challenges that SMEs face compared to multinationals and other established organizations? Number one, you'll find that a lot of SMEs are not organized. The operations are a bit of chaotic. There's a lot of firefighting. You'll also find that the managers, they are not involved on focusing on the business results. Rather, they are focused on firefighting and handling employee issues. You'll also find that there's also a lot of conflict between management and the staff. And the reason you find these things happening in SMEs as opposed to the multinationals and other established organizations such as the government agencies or even established NGOs is because these organizations, they have what we call structures. And these structures come into two forms. Number one, they have policies and procedures. And number two, they have standard operating procedures. So if you're a manager, if you're a leader, or even an entrepreneur, and you're running an organization, and more so an SME, and you don't have these two very important documents, either the policies, procedures, and the SOPs, then the going is going to be very tough for you. So today, I want us to focus on one of the most important policy and procedure, which is a HR policy. I'll define what a HR policy is to you, and then you look at what are the best practices when you're coming up with a HR policy. And even if you need help, then I'm going to share with you my details such that if you don't want to take this conversation further, you can be able to see how we can help you. So the HR policy, it does help in the smooth running of the business. Reason being, when we're defining what a HR policy is a document that governs the relationship between an employer and an employee. So over and above the employment contract, here you are telling your employees, this is my expectations to you. This is how I would want you to behave. And in terms of the behavior, you borrow it from the employment law and also the best practices and what you'd want of your organization. So that way, I can guarantee you then you'll have your company will run more smoothly. Reason because there's a reference point, not only for the managers, but also for the employee. So if an employee wants to take leave, they know how many days you're offering them. If a manager wants to take someone through a disciplinary process, again, the process is outlined. There's something that is guiding this manager, as opposed to them thinking, where do I start? Who do I consult? So whether you have a HR manager or not, it's very important for you to have a HR policy. And whereas the law does not require you, it's not a must that you have a HR policy, there are some components of the HR policy that are required by the law. A good example is the sexual harassment policy. If you have over 25 employees in your organization, you must have a sexual harassment policy. Then also the law does require you to have a disciplinary process policy. So as we are shooting this video this year, that's the way the law is. You need to have a disciplinary process policy, and you also have to have in place a sexual harassment policy if you have those 25 members of staff. So having understood what a HR policy is, then how do you go about coming up with a policy? Do you go on the internet, copy and paste? I'll tell you no, that's not the best way to go about it. Reason being, there are not two organizations which are the same. The organization that I did corporate staffing is not the same as any other HR consultancy firm. It's not any other company in the service industry. So I would highly encourage you, use an expert. An expert will take you through your unique circumstances, and you'll be able to come up with a document that favors you, and not just a document that you've gotten online. So here are the top 3 things to consider when you're coming up with a HR policy. Number one, and this is the most important aspect, is that you should first refer to the employment law. Reason being, you don't want to indicate something. You don't want to go contra to what the employment law states. So for example, if it's sick leave, the law currently as it is, it provides for a maximum of 14 days. So an employee can go for sick leave for 7 days on full pay and 7 days on half pay. That's the way the law is. In terms of leave days, the law does provide a minimum of 21 days. So if you come and say your staff, you want them to be very hardworking and they only go for leave for 15 days, then you'll be going contrary to the law. And the fact that it is in your HR policy, it does not mean that an employee cannot sue you simply because they acknowledge that HR policy. No. So have a look at what the employment law states and make sure that whatever you're indicating in your HR policy more or less mirrors the employment law. And what you can do is you can enhance what is in the employment law. For example, yes, some organizations, they do give a minimum of 21 leave days because that is what is provided by the law. But others, you say they'll give 26 days, even 30 days. Okay. Then there are some aspects which are not addressed by the law. For example, an issue that keeps coming up is the issue of compassionate leave and even the issue of study leave. So if someone is going for study leave, there's nowhere, the law does not provide for that, even if they are going to do exam. So you see either some employers do provide that in their HR policy, or they tell someone, as we are not interested with what you're doing, if you want to go for study leave, you go and come and apply for normal leave. If it's compassionate leave, someone has lost someone, a close family member, again, you can have that in the HR policy because it's not provided in the employment law. So whenever I'm helping clients come up with the HR policies, the starting point is, what does the law say? Having dealt with what the law says, then we move to the next step. And the next step is, what is the management wishes? Why? Because as an owner of the business, as the owner of the business, or as part of the management, this is the way you'd want your organization to be run. And the reality is, the employment law cannot address the every way we interact within the workplace. So as management, you do sit and say, for me, the Employment Act says the staff are supposed to work for a maximum of 8 hours. So for me, I'm okay with people coming at 9. They work up to 6 p.m. Me, I'm okay with people working from home. I'm okay with some people who want to come at the office at 7 and they leave as early as after the expiry of 8 hours, which will be around 3 or 4 p.m. So that is management wishes. So look at your organization. How do you want your organization to run? How do you want your employees to behave? The organizations that work on Saturdays, the others that don't work on Saturdays. There are organizations that have flexi time. So all those scenarios, all those examples I'm using is because that's how the management has decided to run their organization. And so you can also have that captured in the HR policy. The other thing you need to consider is, what are the best practices in your industry sector. Case in point is, for some NGOs, they don't work on Saturdays. For IT companies, a good example is the dress code. I've never seen an IT company with a tie and a suit. Even the people in the communication industry, the journalists, they also don't work a typical 8 to 5 job. So you have to consider what are the best practices in your industry and incorporate that. Reason being, if you're also going contra to what is the best practice in your industry, then you'll not be able to attract the best staff. You'll not also be able to retain them. Because if you come, you hire a journalist and you are very strict on the time, you are very strict on the dress code, you are going contra to what is expected of the industry. So those are the top 3 things that you need to consider when you're coming up or formulating a HR policy. And now the next step is obviously the process of sitting and coming up with the policy itself. I'll have another video for you for that, but for now I just wanted to guide you on that. And please make sure that now when you're done coming up with the HR policy, for it to be effective, it must bear the date. Just like the Constitution of Kenya, we normally say what? Yes, so it came into effect in the year 2010. So it's the same case. A HR policy, because it's a document which can be revised now and then, always make sure that it is dated, and also make sure that the staff signs. Why? Because if you call Perminus to come and help you with the HR policy, and you come up with a very fantastic document, but it is in the shelf and the employees don't know, then you can't come and discipline someone or ask someone, why are you not following the HR policy? So whenever us ourselves, we come on board and we help clients come up with the HR policy, the last thing we do is, if it's a small company, we will train everyone. You let them know, now this is the HR policy we developed for you. And if it's a big company, we will train the managers, and then the managers will train the other staff members. That way, you'll have come up with a fantastic document that serves the institution and serves the employees, and that everyone is aware. So after all is said and done, every staff member has right. They have to write that they've read and understood the HR policy. And if it's a new staff that you're hiring, by the time you hire them, on day one, you give them the HR policy and you give time for them to read. And after the expiry of that period, then they need to sign somewhere that they understand the HR policy, and they'll be bound by the terms indicated in that policy. So that's what I had for you. So if you're looking to make sure that your small or medium-sized company is organized, if you're looking to minimize conflict in the organization, if you're looking to make sure that your manager is focusing on the results and not the retro issues, then it's very important for you to put in place the HR policies and procedure. Having a HR policy can greatly help in the smooth running of your organization. So at Corporate Staffing Services, we do assist companies in coming up with effective HR policies. If you'd like assistance in coming up with a HR policy, or you have one and you'd like us to review what you have, then there's a link below with my contacts, and you can reach out and we'll be of assistance. So looking forward to hearing from you.